Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's a warmish gray day here in San Francisco. One of the most progressive, diverse, intelligent, creative, and expensive cities in the presently existing dumpster fire that is sometimes referred to, or used to be referred to, as the United States. I think I would suggest that that nomenclature is wildly outdated, deceptive, and simply wrong. Thankfully, today I have no intention to delve into politics. Because I'd probably need like some kind of fireproof suit or something to try that. But I'll say a few things very briefly. The history and conceptual, legal, political, industrial, military ideologies that underlie the existence of this country have been fully and completely compromised. The Constitution, such as it once was, has been effectively disposed of. The rule of law is undergoing a complex and sophisticated tactical inversion, and the common people are largely both unaware of and relatively helpless in this matter. Which is tragic. It's not that the United States was the bastion of virtue or anything like this, contrary to commonly distributed propaganda. However, for a long time, in many ways, not in all, this country was the lesser of many evils, and did occasionally rise to noble mutual activity and concern. Those days are gone. Every single person in this country has been surveilled, and the obvious goal is to turn this nation into a prisoneering system. A system of active manipulation of human biology, cognition, relation, behavior. A total system of compromise, domination, manipulation, and the commodification of human beings, our children, our families, our minds and hearts, so that these become assets in a complex system that moves wealth and power into the hands of a tiny, unjustified few and deprives everyone else of these virtues. So that is as tragic as it is terrifying. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about today. So I'm going to get towards the topic I do want to talk about. And the topic has to do with truth, and particularly with verbal truth claims, right? Thus and such is the case. Is the common structure of a truth claim. And I'm not aware of any way to make a truth claim that isn't done in language. Granted, however, that there's a difference between common verbal conceptual truth claims and those that may be promoted by scientists who themselves are very often captured by financial tenure, status, and other concerns. In a nation or a society that valued virtue and truth, we would ensure two things. And the Greeks were aware of these problems very deeply. Amon Hillman talks about this occasionally. The first is that the political system must be uncapturable, which means that people aren't paid. Often they are chosen at random to serve. They should not be married or have children. And this has to do with the risk of various kinds of extortion, blackmail, so forth, that quickly become the rule underlying the structure of political systems where they are not actively prohibited, actively and carefully, insightfully, transparently. And we would have a similar situation with science, right? So that the scientists, the researchers would operate in a context free of influence from politics, governments, and corporations. And then similarly, education systems would operate in a context free of these pollutants and toxins that destroy the history and future of human minds and lives, and of the rest of the planet as well. The anciently conserved ecologies, the myriad living beings whose existence ours arises from and intimately depends upon, to the degree that who and how and what we may become together depends absolutely on the health and the diversity of the anciently conserved ecologies, which are truly the only precious thing here. Not gold, not weapons, not influence, not power, not lying, not deceit, not game theory, not races to the bottom, where if you don't do the bad things, someone else will, so you better get on it. Not multipolar threats posed by industry, the military-industrial prison complex, tech. Actual virtue requires a context that is defended and protected from these intrusions that otherwise naturally and fully capture those contexts, weaponize them, and become a ladder for those who wish to dominate, manipulate, enslave, and profit from the suffering and devastation of other humans and the anciently conserved ecologies. So, any nation that does not preserve free of influence, free of compromise, free of intrusive manipulation, the context of their political, social, educational, scientific, and medical systems, naturally becomes an abattoir, a slaughterhouse. in which various forces race for the privilege of obliterating, harming, managing, manipulating, destroying, poisoning the human project at its roots. And so the fact that the United States perhaps historically did somewhat less of that is notable. But that difference, modest and powerful though it is, does not make us a, quote, great nation, unquote. A great society values virtue, nobility, integrity, truth, biology, relation, health, education, uncaptured medical care, political systems that are not merely resistant to compromise, they oppose it actively. And until such a society is established here, we are living a lie. I don't care what your political leanings are. It's basically just like you go to a grocery store, there's 19 kinds of poison, lethal poison on the shelf, and you pick one and then stomp around about how great the one you picked is. Doesn't fucking matter. You're just the same as all the other conscripts. Yeah. In fact, it's completely unuseful to have political leanings or ideologies in a situation where every avenue of development, history, futurity is pre-compromised, right? You can pick any leaf on a poisoned tree and every leaf is poisoned. Right? And this is the situation that we find ourselves in modernity. What can be done, right? This is a very grim view. So what can be done? What's the upside? So the upside is that small, skillful groups of humans can forge a society together, either spontaneously or in a way that persists over time, right? I think one of the best things to do is to spontaneously form societies, accomplish missions of great virtue and brilliance. And those can be very small missions, right? They can be like, Joe's about to lose his house, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. Right? Something like this. Or, Tina lost her dog, let's go find out what's happening. Can this be solved? Or there's an old woman or an old man living by themselves. We're going to ensure they have company, care, food, love, stimulating conversation, education, something to do that's valuable. Right? These are the kinds of missions that truly matter. But small groups of people can forge societies either spontaneously or under some kind of a stated set of goals and agreements, and train each other in a way not dissimilar to how intelligence agents are trained, right? They can cut their teeth on simple problems, step up the ladder toward more complex problems. People thus trained can be liquid and fluid. Imagine the opposite of a terrorist cell group, right? This is what I'm pointing at. Terrorist cell groups, highly skillful, or can be. We can forge the opposite of that kind of thing. We can have noble human cell groups that are self-educating, self-supporting, self-unifying, immune to compromise from without. And these can become networks. These networks can become the future of our species. That's what we must be doing. Something that resembles that. Roles and status within the groups can be liquid, such that leaders don't become entrenched, right? Because humans are constantly, naturally jockeying for status. So what we have to do is give them a new flavor of status that is oriented around virtue, integrity, intelligence, insight, compassion, love, creativity, education, health. And we can build these teams instantly. Right? There's no impediment whatsoever to doing this. Children do it all day long in their own way on the playground when they're, in a context that's rich and vital and noble. This, I would argue, is what we came to human birth for. We did not come to human birth to make billions of machines, artificial intelligence, trillions of packets of ketchup, to obliterate the anciently conserved ecologies for the sake of the war machine or prisoneering or the domination of the history and future of human potential and intelligence. This is not what we came here for. And the forces engaged in that conflict it's very difficult to come at them head on, right? What has to happen is that we have to capture the resources upon which they depend. And those resources are things like human attention, human concern, human behavior, human activity. We need something better than money to play at together. Because money is a competitive game. And what we need are cooperative games. This is what we were born for. This is what nature does herself. So these are some of the things that have been on my mind lately. But today I want to talk about knowledge. So what do you know? Right? Well, you probably imagine that you have something like a library of things you know. Hot water is hot. Cement and steel are hard. These are very basic, To walk, I must stand. To dream, I must sleep. Right? These are simple, sort of declarative components of the library of things you know. But what you will discover if you look closely, and it's very shocking to discover this, is that knowledge is primarily a matter not of evaluating facts or rationality, which is, what the proposition is. And it's a cone, down near the point of the cone, if we arrange it this way. We have very basic stuff, right? Like can't eat, bars of iron, right? Some of that stuff's pretty reliable, but it's still a matter of agreement. There are humans who have eaten light bulbs, forks, knives, right? There are exceptions to nearly every fact that you could possibly table. So what you will discover if you look carefully at human knowledge is that it is not knowledge. It is propositions, and the propositions compete in the network of human minds for status, for reproductive success, right? Is this what we pass on to our children? And is this what we validate with each other? Knowledge is a political system, right? And the things that you know are almost all of them are false. Knowledge is a matter of agreement among humans. Things we consider to be true are highly agreed upon. Things we consider to be false are highly objected to. Allow me to suggest that that is not knowledge. I'm actually suggesting that the entire library of the things that you think you know and believe are lies. They are concepts that were forged by humans in language. They are representational, right, in that we use tokens to refer to things, beings, relationships, circumstances, functions, outcomes, and so forth. And to the degree that we agree, these become instantiated in the human library of the things we call knowledge. And each of us has a personal subset of that library. And we tend to trust it very, very deeply. It is fundamentally untrustworthy. Because in order to have something like knowledge that was trustworthy, you would need foundations that are known to be true, right? So you would need to know something about what is the universe, right, the supercontainer, what is the everything, what is it for, what is it doing, what are the exemplars that we see before us, the mountain, the moon, the sun, the earth, minds, living beings, plants, insects, animals, water beings, what is the sky? And all we have in our ordinary human systems are conjectures about these things. And nearly all of those conjectures are wrong. Not only are they not reliable, they're formally untrue. Many of them are formally impossible. Right? We don't care. The humans don't care. They're not trying to achieve something like insight or truth. They are recursively recolonizing the network of human minds and its foundations in the ecologies with objects that I call thrisps. These are processes. And the thrisps are extremely aggressive. They are not organisms. They are profoundly competitive, devastating in their effectiveness. And they forge structures that persist in human minds and behavior over time. What grants us immunity to thrisps? So one of the things that grants us immunity to thrisps is to have a concept of them. Okay. If we have a concept of them, then we have a way of seeing into the situation that is useful and can be very powerful. Strangely, the concept of a thrisp is itself a thrisp, but it's a sort of second or third upper order thrisp. Right? So that concept can grant you some degree of immunity. But what our distant ancestors depended on to protect them from this, and they were well aware of the problem. The idea of evil is closely associated with this problem. So what they had was the capacity to transduce the origin signals. And in this matter, they were the symbiotic partners of intelligences that are not human, and many of which are not organic. Right? I don't mean they're machines, I mean they're not embodied. And over time, through a series of cataclysms, these relationships were lost. They were then counterfeited, weaponized, and sold back to us at ever-increasing prices, particularly over the past 2,000 to 3,000 years. of the history of our species on Earth. Now, I'm not trying to be philosophical because I'm not attempting, my goal isn't to produce a bunch of abstract statements, though you may notice that I have been doing so, but rather to illuminate a complex situation in which we are all participants, subjects. We are subjected to these problems. And we have the capacity to overcome them, individually and together, much more the latter than the former. Humans are born, we're made. Like fish are made for water, we are made for developmental efflorescence in small, tightly knit, highly motivated, nobly motivated groups. This is what we are here for, in my view. Your mileage may vary, but I suspect if you look very deeply into these matters, you will find that every child will agree with me, and many adults will also agree. Not that I'm looking for agreement, but remember that the things we call knowledge, these are concepts, and their status, right, their validity, is not determined by the facts. It's determined by human agreement. And this is the fundamental power that human beings have. There are two fundamental powers that underlie our capacities for intelligent and effective cognition, behavior, insight, development, creativity, play, and so forth. And these two concepts both begin with A. The first, in fact, they're kind of interchangeable, but it's useful to have both of them, see them differently. The first is agreement. Right? As a human being, my mind, right, it's sort of like a hungry octopus, right? It reaches out tentacles for anything that will captivate my concern, awareness, attention, and so forth. So it's constantly in this kind of storm of grabbing onto things. Oh, that's scary. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, how beautiful. Right? Like all these things. And if I don't tame it, it drags me all over the place. So in order to begin to tame it, I have to defect from agreement with its low-hanging fruit hunger, with its hunger for the ever lower hanging fruit. Right? And this is a trap we all face, and thus moderns face it more than probably any human beings in the history of our species that we are aware of. So I have to disagree. Right? Much of virtue the womb from which virtue, in which virtue may be fertilized and may gestate and may be born, that womb must be clean. And I don't mean sterile. It must be free of the kinds of toxins, poisons, and impediments that otherwise pre-compromise our capacities for virtue, intelligence, insight, awareness, and so forth. And so in order to keep the womb clean, surprisingly, a goodly portion of the key to virtue's embodiment in us is what we will not do. Right? It's a negative virtue. What we will never participate in. What we will do something else. What we will do something other than. In many of my previous recordings, I've remarked on the strange but I think deeply profound insight that no one knows what anything is. And to know what something is, usually when we use language like this, what is meant, is I have a token in a lexicon that correlates with the phenomena being separated out for attention, concern, evaluation, so forth. Now, think very carefully about what I'm saying here, because I'm attempting to illustrate the difference between what you think a mind is, which is not at all what it is or is for, and what we are trained to do with it. So when we say we know what something is, all that is meant is that there's a correlation between a token I can produce, i.e. that is a tree, that is agreed upon in language, in English, it is true that that is a tree. This tells us nothing about trees, origin, nature, beings, minds, incarnation, the purpose of the existence of beings and situations and so forth. So nothing. There's zero informational content in there. Knowing the name of something, however, becomes confused with having knowledge of the thing. Now, I remember when I was younger, if someone would mention an author or a film, and I had heard of it, and they would ask me, are you familiar with thus and such, or do you know about blah, blah, blah? I would say, yes, yes. And now I realize, no. Knowing the name is nothing. Right? So if someone said something like, I was reading Lacan, are you familiar with him? I'd say, oh yeah, because I had heard the name. You know nothing about Lacan, but I had heard the name. And so I have discovered the problems and the opportunities that I highlight here by looking very carefully into my own mind. Right? And when I am shining the light with the goal of seeking insight on human cognition, language, history, nature, and so forth, when I'm being critical of things that seem outside me, what's actually happening is I'm trying to see my own interiority by looking in a mirror that if I'm very skillful and creative and playful and loving, will reveal my interiority by what I respond to around me in my experience. We have this new tech called AI, and people have a name for it, so they think they know what it is. Let me be very clear, it is impossible to know what that is, because it isn't a thing. It's not a static thing, right? Almost all the other things to which our tokens refer, they are relatively static things, right? Even although a reference like a computer, right? A computer isn't a static thing, it's a very strange kind of meta thing. But an LLM, which is not an intelligent thing, we should be very careful what we allow. I would argue that we should say no to the proposition that intelligence can be in machines, at least for now. But the LLMs, what they are, the computer is a meta thing. And it's a meta thing that resembles some features of our human nature and faculties that we have completely misunderstood. What they are for, where they come from, what they are doing. But the LLMs are a meta thing. So if you think you know what that is, you've never been more confused than than you are by that supposition. Because it is impossible to know what that is. And in case it isn't obvious, if the humans introduce something whose nature and produce is impossible to understand, that will fuck up the entire basis of human cognition in a way that very few people have spoken to yet. So this knowledge stuff, again, it's like a system of concentric circles. The credibility is a topology, and there are statements that we can make that have very high credibility. For example, I am speaking right now. It's pretty credible. Right? And there are statements with very low credibility. Last night I swallowed the moon. It was an accident. I was just standing there and it just rushed down my throat. And now I'm, moon pregnant. That would seem to have very low credibility. However, there are circumstances in which the second statement is more true than any statement we can make. Right? It depends on it depends on the kind of attention we are paying, the purposes for which we are paying attention, entertaining perspectival figurations, right? So if I'm entertaining a hostile reading, if that's my goal, then I'm going to be very solidly in favor, I will agree, that Darren is speaking right now. And I will be very solidly, because, it's hard to object, right, to that first proposition, Darren is speaking right now. Here it is happening. At least the language and the phenomena have a close correspondence. Right? But the second proposition, I've swallowed the moon, I will object to that fiercely. But if I am entertaining an open-minded perspective, I can see that what Darren is up to is not merely speaking, and there's a depth that is unavailable. To the language, unavailable in the language or the concepts, that I can feel my way into. And there is a similar and possibly much richer depth to the second statement, which we might classify as poetic and or metaphysical. This is a different form of knowledge, right? This is a different form of proposition. This is not a rational form. This is a form that resembles something much more like the dreaming mind's way of being in the world, without which we are not in the world at all. Right? People might say, dreams is a bunch of nonsense, just, I don't know, the memory is just doing house cleaning or something, right? Yeah, sure. Well, the faculties that are being used to forge those criticisms would fail to exist if we were not dreaming. And we face this problem over and over again in every new way we can possibly invent as moderns. The foundations of being, knowledge, sentience, intelligence, sensing, understanding, and awareness have been fully captured by rationalist, materialist, policy, right, dogma, thus depriving us of more than 90% of what we are, how we can be, who we can become together. So, Lacan had he named this strange structure in the network of human minds and in the psyche of individual humans. He called it the symbolic order. And it's an alien structure. It's not a human structure. We might, some might argue that it was forged by humans. Well, good for them. This is insufficiently intelligent, right? And is also deceptive, crippling, and so forth. Primarily, what we are subjected to as we undergo the processes of enlanguaging and enculturation, and each person may escape to some degree these terrifying subjugations, but what we are subjected to is a series of amputations. In the same way that on our world, in some places, wildly confused humans mutilate the genitalia of their children. Anywhere you see a behavior like that, you should realize it started in the mind first, right? They must be mutilating their minds if they would go so far as to mutilate their bodies, and particularly their reproductive organs. So yeah, primarily we are subjected to a long, complex cascade of amputations, and this is something I live to oppose, something I find irredeemable. I detest it. But what that means when I say I detest it, it means that I adore its opposites. Right? I'm not just sitting around here like a grumpy guy, going, this is a bad thing. I'm madly in love with our true nature, our potential as living beings, this world, the organisms, insight, liberation, wonder, play, creativity, awe, deep mutual concern, enacted, embodied. So the stuff you think you know, you should think of as toys. And these are very domineering toys. They intend to capture your entire life. Right? They want to eat you. Yeah. They want to dominate your awareness. Or want is probably the wrong word. Their function, because of the kind of toys they are, is to dominate the possibility space of your perceptions, expectations, goals, endeavors, behavior, transactions, relationships, homes, families, children, parents, elders, living world, right? All of these things. These kinds of toys are very deadly toys. They are domineering. They eat minds, souls, and worlds. And those toys have a noble purpose, or at least that kind of toy has a noble purpose. One way to understand this is that the system is set up so that if an aspect of the universe begins to defect very severely, such that it's no longer in communion or receptive coherence with the spirit of life and origin and being, this mode of cognition wakes up, becomes trenchant, and generates disaster. The disaster naturally results in reconciliation, rebalancing, reestablishment of signal coherence, and things like this. Somewhat like when we get sick. And I remember when I was young, I get sick, and the whole idea is that you don't want to get sick. Getting sick is bad. Well, that's not really true. If it kills you or is debilitating, that might be bad. If there's a lot of suffering, that might be bad. But often I would get extremely sick when I was younger. And then the illness would resolve and I would feel amazing. Right? There was some sort of cleansing, purgation that would occur, right? And illness is sometimes accompanied by fasting. You know, there's this old adage, right? Starve a cold, feed a fever. I don't know if there's any sense in that. So you can see that even in humans, right, something's wrong in the environment. That gets into our bodies somehow. Not something's wrong, but something is displaced. And then we undergo a process, a very complex process. Injury can be quite similar, right? Even injuries that don't heal. Yeah? These can grant us new kinds of awareness, new abilities, other faculties emerge. If faculties X and Y have been lost, faculties D and G may arise. Utilizing the energies of the lost faculties to produce novelty and efflorescence, right? Developmental progress or ascension. So this stuff you think of as knowledge, it's not knowledge, it's fake. And what we mean by knowledge, we can mean different things with this word. I can mean different things with this word. But all of the stuff where there's some kind of a statement, the grass is green, almost all of this depends on the word is. Right? This one word, is. Also, there's a very profound distinction that humans are generally unaware of, that philosophers and linguists are aware. The distinction between and the, right? If I say, this is a great human being, Joe is a great human being. That's different than if I say Joe is the great human being. Right? So the is a singular and is a plural. Right? We often make serious conceptual mistakes around these three words, is, and the. So is the linguistic equivalent of an equal sign in math. If I say that is a tree, this is all representational. It doesn't give me any contact with the tree. Right? This is just lexical. Yeah? And most of our knowledge is like this, and it's not based on facts. In fact, facts themselves suppose the existence of an objective observer, which is formally impossible. There are 0 objective observers. But there is, in our brain, the left hemisphere, which prefers abstractions to relationships. It prefers manipulables to beings. Right? It wants bones instead of bodies, fossils instead of organisms, right? This kind of thing. All of the features of your knowledge, these are matters of agreement. If we agree what one is, and we agree that if you add 1 to 1, the result is 2, then that becomes a fact. But there are all kinds of ones that are not unitary, and there are all kinds of ones that if we add them to another, we get nothing. In fact, the entire system of language and knowledge that our minds are captivated by are these kinds of ones. Right? There's the appearance of having achieved some kind of victory, but the victory itself is missing. The insight is missing. The understanding is missing. What we have instead are declarations, and these are authoritative. So the first feature that underlies our cognition and knowledge is agreement. If I don't agree that that's a peach, it's not a peach for me. You can call it whatever you want. And the second, and this is super important, the importance of these two features really, it's impossible to overstate them. Because everything in our minds depends on these two features, agreement and authorization. Authorization is the second one. The two A's. So in order for you to think or believe something, or in order to say or do something, there's a feature of your awareness or your mind or your interiority that vets it, right? And if the vetting process results in a positive, then that feature, that thought, that assertion, that truth claim becomes authorized, and then this results in a form of inaction in cognition, and may result in further forms of inaction in behavior or relation, presuming that some relation is actually going on and it's not just a bunch of abstract structures interacting with other abstract structures, producing an incomprehensible mess. Alfred Korzybyski, among others, S.I. Hiyakawa was another name of a man who was aware of these matters. Korzybyski had discovered this in the 30s, these problems with this idea of knowledge. And he wrote a book called Science and Sanity. His goal was to entirely revise the basis of knowledge in humans. You know, I had a realization one day. I had some help with this, which was the help of a mind that was truly intelligent linked with my own. And it showed me that whatever the sun may be, it is first, A, impossible to conceive of it in its entirety. It's unencompassable, cannot do it. And because there's a bunch of incompleteness in there, right? Like, what the sun may or may not be depends on who is looking and why, which features they excerpt for attention, right? Which features do they cut into pieces to look at? What is their purpose in looking? Which kinds of attention are they producing? Right? Reverent attention is very different from scientific or abstract attention, which is very different from hostile attention, which is very different from loving attention, which is very different from curious, open-minded attention. You see, when we are in information spaces, we are prone, we are inclined to collapse our awareness to a single purposive mode, and this is highly problematical. You should try any other thing, right? Preserve 3 modes every time you're looking at a piece of information, at least, right? 1 is open-minded, 1 is critical, and 1 is seeking a better position than any position that's ever been had. Right? These 3 modes at least. We are being trained to direct critical attention at information and statements, and that you wouldn't want to get rid of that, but if that's dominating the field, your intelligence is over with. It's not what intelligence is. Critical attention is very important. It's like one wing on a 7-winged bird. But that bird needs 7 wings to be the kind of bird that it is, and to fly in the ways that it does. Hoping my wind buffer is sufficiently effective today. But if it's not, my apologies. Not much I can do about it right now. So this library of things that you think you know, you should think of them, as I do, I suggest, as toys, not knowledge. Knowledge, what do we mean by knowledge? Generally what I mean is assertions in language about identity, function, behavior, origin, composition, characteristics, qualia, qualities, situational or functional, connectedness or disconnectedness. Right? And these are all abstract linguistic things. Now, there are other forms of knowledge, but I'm speaking particularly about this little library that we all have of the things we know. Right? I know thus and such. And nearly all of that is wrong, a trap. Context matters a lot, depends on what you're trying to do, right? Because the humans have established the symbolic order, and we are all representational cognitives, we are hypnotized by representational cognition. Words and statements, equivalencies, evaluations, and so forth. And we take these, we replace the complex interior manifold of intelligences and senses and biology and things we think of as impossible. We replace that with the skeletal structure of tokens and equivalencies and so forth, and we call this knowledge most often. So I want you to draw all of that into question. You don't have to throw it away, but you should see that what your mind is for and was made to become is not the librarian of little truth claims. Right? It's not what your mind is for. Your mind is for seeing. And I don't just mean visual seeing. I mean the seeing, the kinds of seeing that give birth to insight, adoration, wonder, awe, the resurrection of the faculties that you brought to this incarnation, their nourishment, protection, and development. Right? True knowledge is not abstract. It's not representations. So this is why I say you should think of these things as toys, and toys should serve your development, not their permanence, authority, dominance, or reproduction. Same is true of language. Hi. It's very shocking to realize that the things that we think of, that we think we know, are not reliable. I remember, to circle back and finish the story, so there is something the sun is. It is fundamentally unknowable. But there are two kinds of knowledge one might have about the sun. And I picked the sun on purpose because without it you won't have a mind. You won't be here, there's nothing. Right? And this is a form of knowledge that we do not much play with as humans. Though there are exceptions everywhere, right? Humans are a topology, not a single thing. So the sun is generating that with which we evaluate or consider it moment to moment, not just historically in some evolutionary process. No, right now. No sun, no you. right? Sun goes away, you know, if it were to go away, which seems relatively impossible, but isn't. We're told there'd be like an 8-minute window before the light and gravity loss would reach the Earth. So it would still seem to be there to us for 8 minutes. I don't know if that's credible, but I've heard this. In any case, there is something that the sun is. And then, separately from that, there are things humans have thought or said about the sun. Those two things are not commensurate. They don't even really resemble each other. Right? And this is true of all things. It is even true of things that humans produce on purpose, like automobiles. But the sun is a very meta, you know. Guess I could call it a hypostasis. But even a car, we have no idea what it is, right? We know simple things about how to produce them. We don't know all the things it does. We don't know all the things it is because we don't actually have fundamental knowledge about anything. You know, this is what I mean when I say no one knows what anything is. But we pretend we do, and that's where we get in trouble. We think we know. But what we mean when we use this word know is very weird. And we should look very carefully at it because it's a trap. It's also an opportunity, right? Every trap has at least the potential to be an opportunity, if it's not mostly an opportunity. Once again, it depends on the kind of attention we bring to it. If we wish to see it as a trap, it's very likely to trap us. If we wish to see it as a key to liberation, it's very likely to liberate us. Same referent, two completely different outcomes. This is what I mean by knowledge as toys. So the way that we play with knowledge determines, individually and collectively, determines whether or not it is beneficial or something else. Even these ideas, beneficial, right? These are linguistic terms, they're abstractions, they are generalizations over complex topologies or continua, right? So we must realize this together. We must teach each other this together, remind each other of this every day. This is part of why I make these recordings. It's not because I love being didactic, though my mind enjoys that exercise, much like a runner enjoys running. No, I'm trying to remind myself of what I have learned, because without a context in which what we learn is preserved and further developed and nourished and protected, we naturally collapse into what we might think of as the lowest or ever lower states of subjugation to features of our potential that are supposed to serve us, not trap us. So if the humans were to disappear, right, instead of the sun disappearing, the humans disappear, we might imagine that the sun would continue to exist, but not for us. And all human ideas about the sun would disappear with us. All concepts, all nomenclature, all scientific or mechanical knowledge or physics knowledge, all that would disappear. The sun would remain, the toys we produced would be gone. It's very important to think, to entertain this thought experiment. Why? Because it points up that the constructs in language that the humans have produced about the sun are trivial. They have nothing to do with the sun. I guess there's one important exception, which is the sun produces the minds that thus conceptualize the sun. And so the concepts and the sun are related in that way. But I want to enhance the distinction between representational cognition and embodied experience, right? If I am lying, half nude in the sun and experiencing the sun, that is not an abstract linguistic or conceptual situation. We can overlay concepts and abstractions and so forth. I better be careful, I might get sunburned, right? Okay, sure. Most humans believe that functional or mechanical knowledge is true. The sun will burn you. Well, it's not true. The sun doesn't burn all kinds of people, right? It doesn't burn animals. Once again, it's a continuum. You have humans or organisms that are extremely vulnerable to sunburn. You have a bunch of environmental variables that affect whether or not the sun can burn my skin. I went for a long walk in bright sunlight the other day with no sunscreen. I did not get sunburned. If I were to lay in the sun, not moving, more likely for me to get sunburned, but it's a probabilistic game. So the way that we tend to conceptualize things is these are facts, these are conjectures, and these, other things are just, made up stuff. Turns out the facts are made up, too. And the conjectures are made up. And the thing that actually is important is one's imagination, because this is the word we use to refer to the space in which all of this takes place. Rationality takes place in the imagination. So I would like to suggest that you think of the things that you have learned and the humans have said to you, and the assertions and the claims, the suppositions, the allegations, and so forth, as toys. Your mind should remain above those toys. It should not be subjugated to their structure, unless, of course, you agree. And we must be aware of when and how and why we are agreeing to subject ourselves to these things. In philosophy, knowledge is often described something like justified true belief. But it turns out that if you look very closely, that depends primarily on humans agreeing about things in language, right, in representational cognition, which is a second order or fifth order toy, right? It's not the toy, it's not the feature of your nature that is actually in contact with that which is. And in fact, there's no such thing as contact because there's no such thing as separation. The whole idea of separation is an abstract idea, right? So, we've got this contact thing backwards. Rather than contact, we should flip that over and say undivided from, right? In unity with. Yeah? And what we are in unity with is that which is. And no one will encompass it abstractly, though we may make toys attempting to do so, some of them more useful or valuable than others. Perhaps those I am forging here will be useful. I certainly hope for that. Useful to you, and children, and elders, and the living world. This is the what determines the value in my hopes. Yeah. So the knowledge that we are inculcated with, that we are imprinted with by the humans, this is largely a false form of knowledge. What is a true form of knowledge? Well, it is active intimacy, right? It's intimacy. it is the kind of experience that we have, depending on, our awareness and how we are embodied, and whether, to what degree are we in our heads, or to what degree are we captured by our habits, or to what degree are we free of them and actually capable of actively sensing and relating with that which is. But the flavor of food, right? What humans call qualia, this is a truer form of knowledge than all of their conceptions. So the experience I have when I kiss someone profoundly beloved to me, presuming I'm, aware and not just captured by my habits and so forth, not distracted. That's true knowledge. The taste of food, the feeling of the body, the somatic, visceral awareness, which is what most of our crucially important faculties depend upon. Not conception, sensing, active sensing. What happens in Tai Chi Tui Shao, right? Pushing hands, very intimate, when it is intimate. The feeling that I'm having right now of walking, and the people that I see and connect with on my walk, this is a truer form of knowledge than the conceptual stuff. We should see that conceptual stuff as toys. The toys should serve us, not serve our individual egos, right? This isn't a game of I'm smarter than you, I've escaped the representational cognition trap, and so now I'm superhuman. No, that's not what I'm pointing at. Although that's a very real danger that I myself have experienced and still struggle with. If one has been outside the cage in which nearly all of your fellow humans are trapped, there are natural problems with self-importance that may arise, commonly do, differently generally for men and women, and for children and adults and for elders. Uniquely for each person who experiences it. This is the nature of experience. It is unique, right? And the goal of abstraction is to get rid of all that uniqueness and produce overarching generalizations that are then imposed as laws, right? This is what is the fact. This is what is the case, or was the case. And this is the most dangerous kind of mental activity you can imagine, right? It's collapsing a manifold of thousands of faculties into one function, one purpose, and that purpose is very domineering and is driven by forces that we are unconscious of, right? The Thrisp networks within the human cognitium, the network of human minds, which is more real. It is as real as the physical environment that we experience, in my view, in my experience. This I have come to understand. Would I say that I know it? No. This is a toy as well, but this toy has a lot of credibility for me. All of my knowledge is a bunch of toys. Do I have beliefs? Well, it kind of depends. Like, do I have them ambiently, like right now? No, think carefully about this. You may have beliefs, right? But if we don't mention beliefs, if no one asks you what you believe, or no one presents what they believe to you, do you have beliefs? When do you have beliefs is a really interesting question to ask. Because what you will probably discover will resemble something like you have beliefs when beliefs are called into question or are under, attack, or some kind of conflict has ensued, right? Do you have beliefs when you're just eating your food? Maybe. I don't know. Think about it. Let me know what you think. So we think we have knowledge, we think we have beliefs, but actually we are an ambient process that transforms based on who we are with, what we are up to, what's going on in the context, how our attention and awareness, intelligence, curiosity are oriented or disoriented, all of these things. Yeah? So all of the propositions about humans are this way, men are this way, women are that way, the earth is of this, the universe is of that, all of that is mostly bullshit, and it's like a storm inside us, right? It forms structure when called upon, and when not called upon, it's in some kind of a cloud state, right? So which is more useful or important, the cloud state or the structures? In language and knowledge, it's the structures. We take them as real. We confuse them with phenomena. It's not right. You never want to do this. If you were aware of it, you'd be extremely cautious about this. Just visiting a tree that I'm very close with. A child asks their parents, "Can the tree talk to me?" Most of them will say no. It cannot. This is knowledge. Nope. Trees don't talk. Well, I'm here to tell you, trees communicate with humans. Love, this communal sense of intra-being and mutual existence, is a transport to forms of communication that there are humans who are aware of. I'm going to have to pause for a moment. All beings are capable of communication, and humans, being beings, can communicate with those beings. Hundreds of times in my recent experience over the past, say, 15 or 20 years. I found a moth in my house. I know that it's not great for it to be in my house for me, mainly because it could, eat fabrics or something like this. So I want to take it back outside. And almost invariably, though language may be involved, it's not required, I can talk the moth onto my hand or another object and keep it oriented until I get it outside. Our interiority is nothing like our thinking. There are thousands of faculties that the humans don't believe in, right? In other words, they don't agree that they're real. They are more real than what they are forging their agreement with. But the humans tell each other all these stories about what can't be true, and so forth, what is true, what we should and should not think or believe. And compared to anything resembling actual knowledge, most of the stuff that the humans are exchanging is both false and wildly unjustifiably aggrandized. Right? So maintain an awareness of this as you interact with the symbolic order, as Lacan talks of it. And we are very compelled, most of us, by these things. It takes training to escape or get some liberty from these kinds of traps. And that's why we need each other, and we need to be reminded. We also need to have direct experiences of things that we have previously not believed in. Right? I was listening to Joe Rogan, day before yesterday. He was talking to Hal Puthoff about remote viewing. Now, I know people who are expert remote viewers. My friend Marla Fries. Hi. Yeah. Hi. Yeah. You know me, huh? Got some ravens here. They are quite competitive if food is involved. We have to have experiences, right? So, Puthoff had trained remote viewers. My friend Marla Fries once described to me in a sequence of perhaps 18 statements with 0 questions and no affirmations or denials from me, the exact layout of my house, what was in each room, what I could see out the back window. Now, I've had this experience myself. I know something about how it works and why it works. And to be clear, what remote viewing is the capacity to see into other positions in time-space. Yeah? And Puthoff had written a paper, and they were trying to get it published in IEEE, which is the central journal for electronic engineers, about remote viewing. And the editor was like, "Yeah, we're not going to publish this." So they went and gave a talk to the engineers themselves. They were very excited. They did some experiments. They found that this is a real thing, that everyone has the capacity to experience, although it is, it's something of a bell curve. The ravens are following me. Of course, I have, basically gold, which is protein. So, they ran some experiments, and the editor could see that this was, this is happening, this is real. And he still refused to publish. He's like, "Nah, this is bullshit." Like, right. His rational mind was objecting very fiercely. This can't be real. This can't be true. So Puthoff said, "All right, here's what we'll do. We will come to your office. We'll set up an experiment. You yourself will do the remote viewing. And if we're successful, right, then, you can decide whether you want to publish the paper or not." So the editor himself was able to successfully, verifiably remote view a situation that had been set up And there were controls, right, about who knew and who didn't know anything to ensure that it was scientifically valid. And it worked. The editor was able to successfully complete a remote viewing session. So then he published the paper. If we don't have direct experiences, it's very difficult to entertain the possibilities that violate the structure of what we think is justified true belief or knowledge, right? So we have to have experiences. We have to seek experiences together and be open-minded about them, not write them in stone. In fact, beliefs aren't really very useful. Beliefs are kind of a trap. What you want is exploration, right? You want insight. You want to be very careful in how you evaluate experiments and play, if your purpose is evaluation. Right? Nearly no one believes it's possible to just touch a spoon and have it bend in your hand. It's real. I've seen it done in front of me. I'm a trained magician. I know the difference between illusions and what I'm seeing. Trained stage magician. Spent about 4 years studying that stuff. Not because I was interested in doing stage magic, because I wanted to understand I wanted to get a much more clear understanding of how those illusions function and how one can take advantage of loopholes in belief, expectation, situational awareness, and so forth to successfully produce these illusions. Most of what we think is impossible is real. And most of what we think is true is bullshit. Exceptions noted, right? Again, it's like a map of concentric circles where if our question is very simple, the truth value is highly credible. If we're looking at something that is not simple, right? Like, is the water boiling yet? That's pretty simple. Truth value of the evaluation probably useful, right? Is the universe dead inside? Impossible. Just a bunch of mechanical shit? Not possible, right? Is the universe conscious? At the very least, yes. Is it transcendent? Absolutely. Is it in a way that we don't even have language about? Yes. So most of what humans are taught to think of as impossible is real. A lot of it is real. And what we mean by real isn't that which exists whether you're there or not, right? Because we, as beings, are participating in producing that which exists, right? This is an open, unfinished process, unlike the assertions of the left hemisphere, conceptual propositions, language, and so forth. This is a place and a way where we are importing impossibility into the physical layer of that which is. So the people running around saying, yeah, it's fucking impossible. The people, they just built the pyramids with fucking wood and copper and shit. These people are out of their fucking minds. There's no chance of that being true. Right? But it's believed by millions of people around the world. Like many completely false things. So just be aware that the humans produce these things, and they are not friendly to your intelligence or your insight or your developmental path, your potentials, your spirit, your soul, your nature. Good to see you, man. The noble purposive spirit of that you brought to your human incarnation. Right? These things are catastrophically unfriendly to most of what you came here to be, know, do, become, and see. Doesn't mean you should throw them away. It means that you should treat them as toys, right? So these are some of my thoughts for today. I am profoundly grateful to have this opportunity to unforget and learn, to see better together, to experience anamnesis, which for me is holy. And to nourish the faculties and potentials that are native to our human nature and the much vaster sphere of our nature as beings. We are not merely human beings. The aspect of us that is human, it is like a flower on a tree of intelligences that humans have been either too timid to imagine or have imagined in terms that are so confusing and distorted and dangerous that they cause dissociation. So yeah, I'm incredibly grateful to have this time today. As I get older, my gratitude index is rising dramatically. Because I know, I will not live forever. So thank you for joining me. I hope you found something beautiful, amazing, insightful, or useful in these explorations. And I hope you'll take a moment to support my YouTube channel, tiny though it is. Leave a comment, a question, a scathing critique. Share this recording with someone who you think may enjoy it. And if you feel so inclined, you can support my channel directly with a donation through Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. There's links in the About section of my YouTube channel if you'd like to support it. And I'm profoundly grateful to those few people who do and have. And if that's you, thank you. And if it's not you, thank you. So thank you for joining me. I look forward to learning together again very soon. I wish you beauty, liberation, health, well-being, the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation, bliss, wonder, play, creativity, and awe. More soon, my friends. Bye-bye for now.